The film begins with a group of children running toward the kingdom of Osros, jubilantly announcing to everyone that the Wicked Witch had died. The entire kingdom's residents poured out into the streets to celebrate and dance in joy. Among them was Glinda, who confirmed the news they had just heard. During the celebration, a young girl asked Glinda why the witch had turned wicked. Glinda explained that the witch had a difficult childhood, with her father serving as the ruler of masks. She added that her birth was a peculiar event because of her unusual appearance. Her skin was green, which astonished everyone. Suddenly, objects in the room began flying and clinging to the ceiling. As a result, her father decided to abandon her, instructing their caretaker to take her away. The caretaker, Dulcibir, raised her and named her Elphie. Later, we learned that Elphie has a younger sister named Nessa. As Elphie played with her sister and talked to her about magic, she was mocked by other children for her green skin, which they compared to the color of frogs. This upset Nessa, making her cry. Enraged, Elphie caused stones to rise from the ground and hurl themselves at the children to drive them away. Her father, angry at her actions, blamed her for Nessa's tears. This harsh treatment only worsened things for Elphie. We return to Glinda and the kingdom's inhabitants, who built an effigy resembling Elphie and set it aflame as part of their celebratory rituals for her death. After the festivities, as Glinda walked away, a little girl approached her and asked if she and Elphie were truly friends. The question puzzled everyone, but it prompted Glinda to recall the past. She admitted to the girl that they had indeed been friends during their school days. Glinda's memory takes her back to her first day at the College of Magic, where everyone warmly welcomed her. Her parents were there to see her off. A young man named Bach appeared behind her to introduce himself. She greeted him and casually mentioned that they would become friends before walking away. During the first day celebration, everyone was taken aback upon seeing Elphie because of her green skin. Elphie introduced herself, showing she had come to accept herself and adapt to her situation. Glinda offered to help her change her appearance using magic if she wished. However, Elphie replied, "How can you offer help to someone you don't know with magic you haven't yet learned?" Afterward, her father appeared, accompanied by her sister, Nessa. He spoke harshly to her, instructing her to stop embarrassing herself in front of people. Then he gave Nessa a precious gift, a pair of their mother's old shoes. It becomes clear that Nessa is a new student at the university, and their father asked Elphie to accompany her, ensuring she is cared for and supported. On the first day of classes, the university director introduced the students to their professors. He introduced Professor Monbine, who was in charge of biological arts, and Dr. Dillamond, the head of the history department. Finally, he welcomed the dean of the College of Magic, Madame Morrib, a renowned figure warmly received by the students. Madame Morrib, in turn, greeted the students on their first day at the college. After the introductions, Glinda attempted to approach Madame Morrib to introduce herself, but Morrib showed no interest and walked away. Meanwhile, Miss Cottle approached Nessa, welcoming her and indicating she was familiar with her father. When she noticed Elphie, she was surprised to learn that she was Nessa's elder sister. Miss Cottle was visibly unsettled by Elphie's appearance and seemed afraid of her. She remarked, "We'll find a place to hide her," but quickly corrected herself, saying, "I mean to host her." She then took Nessa to her room, but Elphie insisted on accompanying her. To stop Elphie, Miss Cottle used magic, causing chaos and destruction in the area. Everyone, including Madame Morrib, was shocked by what had occurred. To cover for Elphie, Madame Morrib went to the college courtyard and announced that she was responsible for the incident. Later, she tried to connect with Elphie and get to know her better, asking for a volunteer to assist her. Glinda raised her hand without understanding the purpose of the request, only to discover that Madame Morrib wanted Elphie to live in the same room with her. Glinda escorted Elphie to her room, initially believing that Madame Morrib had intended for her to room with the dean herself. However, it became clear that she was meant to share her room with Elphie. This marked a turning point in Elphie's life. Elphie expressed her concerns to Madame Morrib, explaining that her father would not allow her to stay at the college. Madame Morrib reassured her that she would handle the situation personally, revealing that she had been waiting for a student with Elphie's talent for a long time. She also hinted that the wizard himself might appoint Elphie as his personal advisor, a prospect that intrigued and impressed her. When Elphie arrived at Glinda's room, she was astonished by its size compared to the other rooms and by the elegant clothes that filled it. She quickly realized that Glinda was special, likely destined to be a queen someday. Glinda assigned Elphie a small spot behind her wardrobe to sleep. During their conversation, Glinda suggested that Elphie might have used magic earlier in the courtyard. Elphie calmly replied, "You surely heard Madame Morib say it was her doing." When Glinda probed further, Elphie slammed the door in frustration, breaking it and shattering the glass. At that moment, Glinda became certain that Elphie had indeed used magic during the earlier incident. The next day, classes began, and the first lecture was with Dr. Dillamond. During the lecture, he asked general questions, and Elphie was the first to answer them correctly. Glinda didn't like this and began mocking Elphie in front of the other students, causing them to laugh at her. However, Elphie ignored her remarks and continued to focus on the lecture. Dr. Dillamond continued discussing history, and when Glinda asked him to talk about the present, he responded by saying that understanding the past was essential, for without the past, there could be no future. Dr. Dillamond decided to clarify his idea using a timeline written on the board, but he was startled to find a phrase written that said, "You should watch animals instead of listening to them." This comment was mocking him as an animal. Dr. Dillamond asked the students who wrote it, but no one answered. Feeling frustrated, he ended the lecture and asked everyone to leave the room. As they were leaving, Elphie noticed some fallen flowers on the ground, so she gathered them and placed them back in their spot. When Dr. Dillamond asked her to join her friends, she responded that she didn't have any. He then said, "But you have a friend now," and extended his hand to shake hers. Later, Madame Morib tried to train Elphie in controlling her magical powers. She asked her to move a coin using only her magic, but Elphie couldn't control her powers. Madame Morib encouraged her and asked her about what happened in Dr. Dillamond's lecture. Elphie began recounting what had occurred and expressed her desire to help him, emphasizing her refusal to accept any form of bullying, whether it was directed at her or anyone else. As she spoke with passion and anger, she finally succeeded in moving the coin. Afterward, Elphie decided to visit Dr. Dillamond. When she arrived, she overheard him in a secret meeting discussing a decision to ban animals from teaching students. He was also upset about what had been written on the board and mentioned the recent disappearance of many animals without any explanation. While she was listening, Elphie accidentally made a sound, which caught Dr. Dillamond's attention. However, he wasn't angry with her. Instead, he invited her in and offered her a cup of tea. When she asked him if what she had heard was true, he confirmed that the animals were indeed disappearing without any clear reason. On her way back to the dormitory, Prince Fiero accidentally startled her with his horse. He dismounted to check on her, but he was surprised by her usual appearance. He tried to apologize and offered to give her a ride, but she declined and continued on her way. When Glinda learned that Prince Fiero would be joining their school, she began paying more attention to her appearance in an effort to attract his attention, as did many other girls. Prince Fiero became the subject of admiration for everyone, but he appeared uninterested in any of them. Glinda decided to speak to him and asked if he was looking for something or someone in particular. The moment he saw her, he was taken with her, just as she had been with him. She acted as though she didn't know who he was and asked, "Are you a new student with us or just a guest?" She then took him on a tour of the school library. While the students sang and danced around him, Elphie quietly left the scene. After the school day ended, Book approached Glinda and asked her to go out with him in the evening. Instead of accepting, Glinda pointed to Nessa and told him, "She's the one you should go out with." Book listened to her advice and went to Nessa to ask her out, which made Nessa very happy. She told her sister Elphie about what happened, explaining that Glinda had encouraged him to take that step. Elphie couldn't believe that Glinda would do such a thing. In the evening, Glinda was getting ready to attend a party with the other students. Her friends found an old hat and asked her to wear it, but she refused, explaining that it belonged to her grandmother and she kept it as a keepsake. When Elphie entered the room, everyone left. Glinda offered to take Elphie with her to the party and told her the hat would look great with her style. She left the hat for her and said, "It's up to you if you want to come." Glinda went to the party with the others, where Fiero was dancing with her. Book tried to imitate them and started dancing with Nessa, who was overjoyed. Later, Madame Morib arrived at the party and asked Fiero to leave them alone. Madame Morib handed a magic wand to Glinda, who thanked her, thinking she believed in her abilities. However, the truth was that Madame Morib didn't believe in her and told her that Elphie was the one who insisted on including Glinda in the magic workshop. Glinda didn't understand why, but she felt happy. Elphie appeared at the party wearing Glinda's hat, causing everyone to stop dancing and the music to stop as they stared at her and mocked her appearance. Elphie tried to keep her composure, took off the hat, placed it on the ground, then returned to her spot and began dancing in a strange way. The laughter continued, and Nessa felt embarrassed by her sister's actions. Elphie put the hat back on and began to cry as she looked at Glinda. Glinda decided to support her, walked over to her, and began dancing with her in front of everyone. Glinda's friends tried to stop her, but she refused and continued dancing. Elphie started teaching Glinda her strange way of dancing step by step, and during this, Elphie broke down in tears. However, Glinda calmed her down and continued dancing with her. Unexpectedly, everyone started to imitate their dance, even though they had mocked Elphie at first. It seemed that they enjoyed the dance thanks to Glinda, who managed to break the barrier between Elphie and the rest of the students. The next day, Elphie attended Dr. Dillamon's lecture, carrying flowers for him. However, he asked her to sit down, as he wanted to discuss something important. He announced to everyone that this would be his last day teaching, because new laws prohibited animals from teaching humans. Soon after, Miss Coddle entered with the police and arrested Dr. Dillamond, escorting him out of the room in an embarrassing manner in front of everyone. Elphie tried to intervene, but they forced her to sit down. During this, a young lion cub appeared, locked in a cage. They explained that this was the place designated for animals, as they were not allowed to be teachers for humans. Elphie asked the cub if it was scared, and she noticed that it seemed like it had been tortured. The doctor assured her that the cub hadn't been touched, but it was afraid because it was surrounded by humans. Elphie felt angry when she sensed that the doctor was lying to her. In a fit of rage, she struck the desk with the flowers, causing the petals to scatter all over the place. The flower that landed on each student caused them to fall asleep instantly. As a result, all the students, except for Elphie and Fiero, fell unconscious. Fiero decided to free the lion from its cage and help her smuggle it out before the others woke up. They managed to carry the lion on their bike to the outskirts of the school and into the forest. Elphie led the lion to a pond to quench its thirst, while Fiero reassured her that he would support her in anything she did because he trusted that she was doing the right thing. The next day, Madame Morib called Elphie and informed her that a message had arrived from the Wizard Oz. The letter contained an invitation to visit the Emerald City. Elphie felt apprehensive about facing the wizard, fearing she wouldn't be able to control her powers in front of him. However, Madame Morib encouraged her and expressed her confidence in Elphie's abilities. When the train arrived to take her to the Emerald City, Madame Morib urged her to board quickly. Glinda came to say goodbye, but she seemed upset, especially because of Fiero. Elphie sensed a change in him since Dr. Dillamond was expelled from the school and thought that he might have feelings for someone else. At that moment, Fiero joined them to say goodbye to Elphie. He told her he would never forget the day they spent together when Dr. Dillamond was kicked out, then left without speaking to Glinda, which only increased her frustration. When it was time for Elphie to depart, everyone was happy to see her off, but she realized she had forgotten the message that the wizard had sent with Glinda. Suddenly, she had the idea to take Glinda with her to the Emerald City. At first, Glinda refused, but eventually, she agreed and jumped onto the train before it departed. Upon arriving at the Emerald City, they noticed that everyone was wearing green to welcome Elphie. They enjoyed the performances that were held there, and the city was truly mesmerizing. When Elphie arrived at the palace, she presented her invitation to the guard, who informed her that the wizard had asked for her by name. They entered the enormous palace and encountered a monkey named Jestrig, the leader of an army of armed monkeys. Once they reached the wizard's chamber, they were shocked by his terrifying appearance, which frightened them both. Elphie wanted to leave, but Glinda encouraged her to stay and face the situation with courage. The wizard asked Elphie who she was, and she told him that she was Elphie, the one who had been invited. Suddenly, the mask the wizard was wearing malfunctioned, revealing his true form. It turned out that he was the famous Wizard Oz, who had been hoping to make Elphie his advisor. The wizard explained that people thought his terrifying appearance was his true form, so he had to appear this way in front of them. He then asked her to make a wish that he would fulfill for her. Elphie asked him for help in granting freedom to animals, just like Dr. Dillamond had requested. The wizard immediately agreed, confirming that he had expected her to make that very wish. Madame Morib arrived to witness the pivotal moment with Elphie. The monkey, Jestrig, lifted the cover of an old book called the Grimy, a rare tome on magic and witchcraft. Elphie recognized the book, and it was meant to be a test for her powers by reading a spell from it. As she approached, the book opened by itself, signaling that she was the chosen one. Jestrig, the guardian of the Emerald City, explained that he was saddened because he couldn't speak like the other animals. Suddenly, the book opened to a page containing a spell that would give wings to monkeys. Madame Morib had believed that learning the spell would take years, but she was astonished at how easily Elphie was able to read it. The spell began to take effect on Jestrig, causing wings to grow from his back, though he experienced great pain during the process. However, he eventually succeeded in flying, something he had never done before. When Elphie asked Madame Morib how to reverse the spell, Madame Morib explained that it couldn't be undone, meaning Jestrig would remain with wings. As Elphie stepped outside, she was shocked to see that the spell had affected all the monkeys around them, granting them wings as well. The Wizard Oz exclaimed joyfully, "Finally, we have spies who can fly." Elphie then realized that he had been using the monkeys for his own dubious purposes and understood that he was behind the rebellion of humans against animals, with Madame Morib's help. When she asked why he hadn't cast the spell himself, she discovered that he couldn't use magic on his own, which was why he had relied on her. He tried to persuade her to stay with him, even offering to let Glinda join her if she wished. However, Elphie refused his offer and left. Madame Morib ordered the flying monkeys to capture Elphie before she could escape. The monkeys tried to break the glass to catch her, but Elphie managed to flee. Glinda joined her and urged her to return and reason with them, but Elphie refused. The wizard Oz used his terrifying face to command the guards to capture Elphie. The two women climbed into a hot air balloon to escape, but the guards were able to chase them down. One of the guards grabbed Glinda by her foot, but she managed to strike him and break free. However, there were too many guards to escape easily. Ultimately, the guards decided to close the city's gates, preventing the balloon from flying far away. The balloon descended rapidly, and Elphie and Glinda jumped out before it crashed. They entered a room and locked the door behind them. Madame Morib then announced to the city that Elphie was an evil witch who had stolen the Grimy book and cast a spell on the monkeys to torture them, turning the city against her. Glinda asked Elphie to apologize to the people to resolve the situation, but Elphie refused. Instead, Elphie began reading a new spell that turned her broom into a flying vehicle for her escape. The guards arrived at the room and tried to break down the door. Elphie asked Glinda to ride the broom with her, but Glinda hesitated. Eventually, Glinda gave Elphie her coat, which she put on her back, making her look exactly like the witches. When the guards broke into the room, they captured Glinda while Elphie flew away on the broom. She struggled to control the broom and fell from the tower, but managed to gather her strength and flew again. As the flying monkeys and guards pursued her, she performed a maneuver that caused them to collide with each other, allowing her to escape. Elphie left Glinda behind with the guards, and Madame Morib announced to the city that Elphie was an evil witch, justifying their actions against her and portraying her as an enemy to everyone. If you love movies and movie recaps, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more. Hit like if you enjoyed the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.